Hi,
Hi.
how's it going?
Good, good.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, all right. It looks like video is all set up. Thank you so much for coming back for part two. I can't
Thank
believe
you.
it. We were kind of talking about your experience in the labor camps when we last left off. And we're filming right
Yes.
now. And so we could, if you're ready, we could just get right started and
Okay.
continuing to talk about that. What really struck me was the fact that you guys would literally carry the products that you were creating in these labor camps to the bathroom and then back because your quotas were so insane and strict. Can you just talk about how it feels to know that so many American products today are from these labor camps in China and the connections there? Because a lot of people do not understand.
Yes, I always feel so sad because, people like me, like us, were making those products with tears and our blood. And that's why those made in China products can be so cheap because they don't have any labor cost. And American business and also business in other countries have to compete with this kind of product. So in the one hand, American businesses, workers are losing their business, losing their job. And on the other hand, they are the Chinese Communist Party, they are making huge amount of money because of this slave labors, and people like us were starved or work so hard that our health was damaged, and our life was wasted in there. And on the same time, because of the money accumulated by the CCP now has this ability or this power to bully around in the entire world. They use money to buy off so many countries to vote for them. If anyone wants to say, hey, let's pass on a resolution in the United Nations to condemn the CCP's human rights abuses. But so many countries says, no, we can't do that. So we actually gave the CCP the ability, the money, and the power to abuse ourselves. That's the result. It's not just how pitiful those people like this labor camp slaves are. I think everybody except the CCP is a victim in all this if we don't stop this.
Mm, mm. Now, do you remember how old you were when you were first sent to the labor camp? And did they send you there with an amount of time that you had to spend, or was it based on if they thought that you had been re-educated? How did you get out of that situation?
Yeah, when they decide you to send you to a labor camp, yeah, they give you a so-called sentence, but the labor camp system is totally administrative one. So you don't have, there's no trial, no legal system to get through with. So a party member or that is actually a government or administrative decision from the so-called labor camp committee that is usually under the political and legal committee of the Chinese Communist Party. And especially after the crackdown of Falun Gong, they set up a special office called the 610 office, which is specialized in persecute Falun Gong. So they gave me a so-called sentence, which says you are to be there for 1 year. But in reality, it all depends on whether you submit to them or not, whether you choose to be transformed or reformed or not. If you refuse to write up, they call, sometimes they say three statements, sometimes they say 5 statements. Anyway, if you don't transform as they expected they will just write up another one for you. So you are going to be held there unlimited time. But if you transformed and do a good job for them, if you help them transform others, you can be released ahead of time. So it all depends again, on your thought. If you think together with the CCP, everything will be fine. If you don't, if you refuse to accept their brainwashing, you can be held there indefinitely.
Okay, so then how do they judge if someone's thoughts are in line with them or not? Did you see that most people would just say whatever was needed to get out? And would they try and trick the CCP into them thinking that they had fully been re-educated? Or did they keep their faith, or were people actually transformed with this process? Did you see anybody actually get re-educated?
There are so many different kind of situations. I think what pains my heart is the CCP actually take advantage of Falun Gong people's or Falun Gong practitioners' principles, because Falun Gong promotes truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. So if you are really a serious Falun Gong practitioner, you are not actually supposed to take a little single line. That's how they manage to tell whether you are a Falun Gong practitioner or not. They just stop you on the street and ask you, are you a Falun Gong practitioner? If you say no, they believe you are really not a Falun Gong practitioner, because Falun Gong practitioner will not tell a lie. If you are telling a lie, you are not. So if they say this, you say yes, they just arrest you. So
Wow.
when I remember,
well, that makes it easy for them.
And sometimes they want to stop, Falun Gong practitioners in other provinces from going to Beijing to appeal for Falun Gong. How can they tell who is Falun Gong, who is not? They just stop anybody. They just maybe sometimes they put on a portrait of the Falun Gong practitioners, of Falun Gong's founder, Mr. Li Hongzhi, his name. They put a portrait on the ground, so anyone who wants to get on a train or a bus, you need to trample on his portrait to get on the bus. If you refuse, you must be a Falun Gong practitioner. So they arrest you. Even if you are already on the train, they ask you to say nasty words, to say bad words. They know Falun Gong practitioners have principles. They don't smoke, they don't drink, they don't say nasty things against others. So they ask you to say very, very bad language. If you refuse, you are probably a Falun Gong practitioner. So when I was, I think, in the prison for the second time, some other non-Falun Gong practitioners, they just couldn't understand. They said, why you guys are so stupid? Why don't you say you are not a Falun Gong practitioner? Then you won't ended up here. And how can I explain to them? Because and forbearance, we can't tell a lie. If we tell a lie, we've already been transformed. So that's the logic. So that's how hard it was. So how can they tell you whether you are transformed or not? In the labor camp, they have, like I said, either sometimes 3 steps, sometimes 5 steps. Step 1, you need to write up a guarantee to say, I guarantee I will give up Falun Gong. Next, you need to write a long essay to criticize Falun Gong and to tell others why you decided to give it up, why it is an evil cult, and how your thought changes and what you intend to do after you are transformed. And then you need to turn in all your Falun Gong books to the police. And finally, that's the most difficult one. You need to help the police. Sometimes to help the police to torture other Falun Gong practitioners, to reform them, to prove to the police that you have really, really been transformed. So that's how hard, how high standard there is. They transform you from a peaceful man into somebody as bad as the police, who are willing to beat other people, to curse other people, to help the police to do evil things. That's their standard of transformation. So that's why I saw many people they could not handle with all this kind of mental pressure. On the one hand, if they don't transform themselves, they could be tortured to death. Sometimes because they couldn't handle the pressure. Sometimes they say, oh, okay, I'll transform. And then you are asked to do those things and you can't, push yourself to that far. You are caught in the middle and then you collapse mentally. So I really saw cases of people being driven into insanity because they couldn't handle all these different, mental pressure. And sometimes they just didn't allow you to sleep. I saw a young lady in her 20s suddenly became insane after 5 days, 3 nights, or no 5 days, 4 nights, no sleep and all continuously. They ask other people, they are in shifts, they are in a rooster, they watch over you to make sure you don't sleep. So after 5 days, 4 nights, non-sleep, she suddenly collapsed. She became insane. She didn't know who she was after that.
Wow. Now, a few questions from that. First, I hear a lot of people, we interview a survivor for every episode, and a common theme has been that their faith or their belief in something greater than themselves and a greater figure out there is what got them through the terrible moments when they were thrown in jail, when they were beaten or tortured, and when they were truly tested. Did you see that in yourself? Did you feel like that happened? And were you able to see any differences between how people who had a deep faith handled going through the camps versus more godless people, or more people that maybe just didn't have a set of moral virtue?
Yes, I think definitely people who don't have faith. I think in China, the majority of people are atheist. They don't believe in God because that's how they were taught. And that's how I was before I practiced Falun Gong. So if you don't have faith, you don't believe in higher beings or higher wisdom, you can only see what's you only believe in what you can see in this world. Then you will think the CCP is unbeatable, and you'd better be practical. You'd better make the police happy so you can be released ahead of time. So those kind of people, I think, are very easy to do evil with the CCP or to follow the CCP, or at least they don't have that kind of courage because the CCP is so powerful, especially when you are already in the labor camp, in the prison. You have no rights whatsoever. Your mere survival depends on the whim, on their thoughts. That's why the police hate Falun Gong practitioners so much, because Falun Gong practitioners are not afraid of them. They are afraid of their gods, of their belief. They believe in something higher than beyond this human world. So sometimes even if you take away all my money, take away my job, even take away my life, I really don't care. That's why they hate Falun Gong so much, because these people really don't care that much about how the CCP treats them or thinks about them.
Now this is more of a controversial question, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on it. When you tell a story like how they prevented a young girl from sleeping for 4 nights, 5 days, and they just kept her up and it drives her crazy, what is the goal of these re-education labor camps? Is it just the fact that if they started killing people in massive numbers, they would get too much attention from the international community and actually start some big problems, but they're able to skirt under the radar a little bit and get away with it because all they're doing is really torturing and beating and mentally driving people crazy? Because I don't think that this is a way you make very solid figures for society. I mean, did they reform this young woman who was turned crazy and then send her back into society and she became a supporter of the CCP and a well-functioning member of the community? I highly doubt it. And so what is their goal if they're just trying to torture these people? And or is the other thing the fact that they thrive off of the slave labor that they get by sending people to the camps? What do you think is the big vision and purpose for why they do this? Because it honestly makes more sense why don't they just kill their opponents?
Yes, I think this is a very, very big and deep question. For the individual policemen, their goal is very, very simple because they have a quota to achieve. Their quota is they have to reform 95% of the Falun Gong practitioners in the camp. Otherwise, they, like I said, they would be fined, they would lose money, and they can't even keep their jobs. So
Wow.
for
Okay.
their goal, if they want, as long as they reform you, whatever method is workable, they adopt it. Whether you became an insane person or not, whether you became not useful to the society, even if you died, they don't care as long as they keep their job, they keep their money. So for those individual, I think policemen, their goal is simple. They need to achieve this goal. And I think for many CCP officials, high level or low level officials, they were actually driven by this system, by their ideology, to carry out what the party told them. And for the party itself, I think I do really recommend everyone to go read a set of book called The Specter of Communism is Ruling Our World. And before that, there was another one called Nine Commentaries on Chinese Communist Party. And there was a theory which I think can explain everything very, very well. It says actually the communism is a specter. It's an evil being in other dimension. And that is an individual specter controlling human beings in this world who think similar as this specter, or who has evil thoughts like theirs, so they can be easily controlled. So the goal of the evil specter of communism is not like every normal government in this society wants to build the society better, want to build a better society, want to have the people live a happy life. But the goal of the specter of communism is to destroy mankind. And they are consisted of, very negative elements and hatred. So hatred is the most, I think, fundamental nature of the evil specter of communism. So if it is to destroy mankind instead of building up a better society, even if it is the ruler of China, its goal is still to rule, to ruin, to destroy China, not to have Chinese people make a better society or a better life. So if you look at things from this angle, you will understand why they are doing all those kind of crazy things, irrational things, and unbelievable things, because their goals are different, their principles are different. Everything of theirs is anti-humanity. So normal human being can't really understand their mentality.
Okay. Now, something that we hear out of Cuba, I don't know if you've heard this. I love historical tidbits and connecting the dots between different regimes around the world. So Che Guevara in the communist regime in Cuba, he purposely would invite family members to the political prisons and then force the family members to watch their loved ones that were in the prisons be shot. And the intention with that was to make sure that the family members would leave traumatized and then spread that fear throughout the community, because they'd go out and tell the story of what just happened to them. And it would build fear throughout Cuba to make sure that nobody else would ever want to do whatever those family members, people who had been killed, had done. Did you see that kind of tactic in China? Did they hope that what they did to the prisoners, the torture, did they hope that that will spread and potentially suppress anybody from wanting to join Falun Gong or really do anything against the CCP?
Yes, definitely. I think it's also happens differently in different circumstances. Sometimes they want to cover up what they do to Falun Gong practitioners, so that they want to cover up. They know it's bad thing, but sometimes, like you said, they want the family know because so that they can spread their fear. And there is a true story, like they tortured a pregnant wife in front of her husband to make her husband and also this woman to transform, because they are both Falun Gong practitioners. So, and there's another true story of like they want to reform a Falun Gong practitioner who refused to be reformed, and then they have 20 plus of his family's relatives all coming to the police station and have them all kneel down in front of this Falun Gong practitioner, say, if you don't reform, all these people will lose their job. And at this stage, this was too much for this Falun Gong practitioner. So he submitted, he gave in. So they definitely want to spread the fear. I also actually the other day I heard from a very old lady. She's already 87 years old this year, and she told me a true story. When she was young, the CCP, when they executed people, they especially have young children, primary school children, go watching the process, and the children are put in front of the adults. So this woman, she is very kind-hearted. She told me when she saw those children were forced to watch the process of the so-called landlords or anti-communist bad guys being executed, it really broke her heart. Why should you submit young children to this kind of cruelty? But that is what the CCP has doing in the society. Yes, I think fear, to maintain a certain amount of fear, is very, very useful for them to keep their power. So they need to create it, maintain it, and spread it. If everybody lives in fear, they can control these people.
Wow. I haven't heard that story before, but I've heard what they've done in other ways to manipulate kids. That's not surprising, unfortunately. So you're in the labor camps. How did you get out, and what's that story of you transitioning and really leaving this communist regime? I mean, how did you accomplish a feat like that?
Yes, I think for my labor camp sentence was year. So for the first half, for the first 6 months, every day I struggled to maintain my sanity and try not to be reformed by them. And suddenly I remember very clearly in October 2000, that was 6 months after I was, arrested for the first time. I somehow, because I witnessed and I experienced too much, like I said, on the first day, I thought I was, somehow transformed to the last concentration camp during Second World War. I couldn't believe this was 21st century. So after 6 months of witnessing us experiencing all this unprecedented crime, I suddenly developed a very strong impulse or a desire to write a book and tell my story, to tell what I see, what I experience in the labor camp to the entire world, because I know how huge this evil is and what it meant for the human history. Because I had some education, I look at the human history from a bigger angle, so I understand the importance. So after I suddenly developed that strong desire, of course, immediately I was faced with a dilemma. If I don't reform, I can never be released. if I want to write this book, I have to be reformed. So that was a very, very hard struggle, mental struggle for me. The struggle itself to transform or not to transform nearly killed me for another 1,000 times. It was worse, far worse than any physical torture, electric shocks, slave labor camp I experienced before. And after a very, very long mental battle within myself, I guess more than a week or something, I finally forced myself to write a statement to promise them that I won't practice Falun Gong anymore. And then, like I told you, I thought after that they would let me go. They would think I have been transformed, but the reality is not. So in the remaining 6 months in the labor camp, every day I had to struggle between, not want to tell a lie and can't tell a truth. What can I say? And I have to write long, long essays to try to convince them that I have been reformed without betraying too much of my consciousness, of my conscience, of my principles. I still hold true in my heart. Sometimes I feel after practicing truth, compassion, and forbearance for more than 2 years, betraying these principles is like killing myself. So I prayed for many, many times that I pray that no any other human being in the future would ever be submitted to what I was submitted anymore. That was too cruel. I think there were so many times I couldn't make peace with myself. I couldn't reconcile all these things. I couldn't convince myself what I'm doing is really correct. What I choose to do is not against my will. It's not doing more harm than good. And I can't discuss this matter with anybody because they have people surrounding me 24 hours. If I go to the bathroom, they have people follow me and watch all the process. I have no 1 minute of privacy. Even if when I slept, when I went into my dream, I prayed, don't let my dreams betray my secret, because sometimes people speak while they dream because the police they really want to find out what's really in my mind. I write something, I think for me I've already sold my soul 1,000 times, but for them those things are still not enough. They still are not 100% sure whether I have been transformed or not. So every day nobody knows how hard the battles are. I have no friend, I have no people to discuss, to talk about, and I have to make all these decisions myself and to battle with my own conscience and to try to resist the priest pressure, but at the same time, I want to convince them that I have been transformed. I will not practice Falun Gong anymore. I will not do them any harm if they release me. So I do recommend everyone go get a copy of my book, Witnessing History, One Woman's Fight for Freedom and Falun Gong, to really get to the details how on every single step. I managed to stay sane and overcome all the atrocities and survive all this and still be able to talk to you today.
Wow. And I ditto that. I completely endorse that. So we will put the link for everyone listening. The link to buy her book is going to be there in the description for YouTube on the video version. It'll be there as well. And I'll definitely promote it on my own pages. I don't promote many books, but I promote really, really good books. And I believe everyone needs to read yours. Now, so you thought that if you spoke out and admitted that you had, admitted that you had been changed in your heart, you would be let out, and they kept you there for another 6 months, you're saying?
Yes. And
Wow.
every day I need to, convince them. The process was so hard. They need to, test me, examine me again and again. I think if they have a machine that can test people's thoughts, they would definitely put that machine on my head. Maybe in the future, when the AI is developed enough, they would do that, definitely.
Okay. And so when it came around time for that 1 year mark, did they say you're going to be released soon, or how did you actually leave?
Even on the eve of my release, I was given another test. There was a young girl, I think she was only 18 years old or something. She was sent to the camp. That was her first night in the camp. And the police asked me to watch over her to make sure she did not fall asleep. Because that became a standard procedure after October 2000 for anyone who was sent to the labor camp. As long as you don't reform, you are not give sleep for however long you can hold on. So when I was in the camp, the longest record was 13 days or 15 days and 15 nights. After I left, there was another woman who broke that record. She managed to hold up for 42 days and nights. No
With no
sleep.
sleep?
No sleep. 42 days and nights. So I was given that task. I feel so sorry for this girl. She was so young, only 18 years old. She was so scared. And my task was to watch over her. Because my role and the image, or my supposed role is a transformed Falun Gong, was willing to help the police do the evil who, and believe from the bottom of my heart that Falun Gong is evil and it is a good thing to help the police to transform others. So I couldn't show any sympathy at hand because this is my last test and my last task to go through before I can be released. So I remember very clear. After a whole night of non-sleep, in the morning, we were often asked to do, military trainings in the ground, like we need to march like soldiers. So in the morning, when we did our military style exercise in the morning, the girl was right beside me. And I marched together with her. And I really didn't feel any happiness in my heart because I was told already I was going to be released on the day after, I finished my last task. But I didn't feel happy at all because I thought to myself, what's the point of me getting released if her and all the others are still there? So that's how hard it was to earn your release from the labor camp. I really don't know how others handle all this. For me, actually, after I was released, it was the local police director who took me directly to the police station. I wasn't released to my home or my family. And I was told inside the police station, because there are now too many Falun Gong practitioners, they can't, imprison all in. There are no enough labor camps. So now they have set up many temporary, they call it law school, whatever name. So they arrest Falun Gong practitioners in schools, hospitals, mental hospitals, whatever facilities they can find. They call them brainwash, or not, they call law study. Actually, they are brainwashing centers. And the police told me I was supposed to go to those centers and continue to be used as an example of reform and to help them to reform the others. If I don't, I will be sent back to the labor camp, and I will be counted as have not been reformed yet. So that was the so-called release, and that was the situation. So at that stage, I felt I would rather die than go back to be continued to be used as a reform example and to continue to do what they want me to do. So after 1 year of separation from my family, from my daughter, although I wanted to stay with them so much, I had to escape again, only 5 days of my release. So I was in hiding since then. Only 5 days I escaped. I hid in Xinjiang province, actually. And I wandering around in the country, try not to be caught. And at the same time, I started writing my book, because I actually had started writing it in my mind, in my head every day while I was in the labor camp. I tried to remember as much as I can. Whenever I heard something, I tried to ask around so that I can write as detailed, as truthful a book, a memoir as I could. So every day after I finished writing, because I knew the police was after me, I erased all the record from my computer. I copied them onto, at those time we are still using this little floppy disk. I copied the content onto 2 floppy disks. I hide them somewhere. I was preparing that I could get arrested anytime. And every several days, I sent what I've already wrote to a relative in New Zealand, and I asked her if she lost contact with me for more than 10 days. I asked her to try to publish how much ever I've already written on my behalf. So that's how the first half of my book was written under that kind of circumstances.
Wow. And so at the same time, did you try and start applying for status in a country that could take you out, or what was your game plan?
My game plan is I actually didn't have any plan while I was in the labor camp. I didn't have a visa. I didn't even have a passport even. So, but I only knew I wanted to go out of China, because that is the only possibility when that I can have my book published and I can survive and I can tell my story to the world. So I think the good thing is I speak English, and I somehow from the English literature I wrote from my childhood, I thought and I knew that I can trust Westerners. So I try to, go to those tourist sites like the Great Wall of Beijing, and I try to share my story to several Westerners. And I met an Australian couple who went to China to study, to teach English. And I also met an American professor from the University of Arizona. She took a group of students on an exchange, is some kind of program with a university in China. So I told them my story and how desperately I needed to leave China. And I told them I was writing this book. And both this Australian couple and this American professor agreed to help me. And I was so grateful that both they tried so hard to get me invitation. So the Australian invitation arrived first. So I was able to get a 3-month, business visa to visit Australia. And actually the next day of my arrival in Australia, the invitation letter from the Arizona University also arrived and offering me a job, actually, position in the university to work as an assistant to teach Chinese language. But at that time, I was already in Australia, so I applied for a 3-month business visa, applied for asylum in Australia, and I was lucky to be granted refugee status by Australian government 2 years later. So that's basically how I escaped. Till today, I'm still very, very grateful to the people who helped me escape in China.
Wow. Wow. I thank them very much. And what have you done since then? I mean, now you're free and you're in Australia, you're protected. Were you still nervous that anybody could come after you, or is that not a real concern? And then what did you start to do? Did you start to track your life and plan out the launch of the book and how you were going to live your life now as a free woman?
Yes, of course. The first thing after I escaped China and arrived in Australia is to seek asylum, to hand in my refugee application. And I also started contacting media to tell them my story. And at the same time, I continue to write my book. So the Chinese version of my book was published, and I was lucky to find a publisher in Taiwan which agreed to publish my book. So the Chinese version of my book was published in January 2004. And also, I think many fellow Falun Gong practitioners in Australia, they helped me to contact the media, to tell my story to the media. So I remember the first report about my story was published in December 2000 in Sydney Morning Herald. And then after that, I sometimes got invited to speak in the media. So once, while I was telling my story in Australian, I think ABC radio, a publisher, an editor from the Australia's largest publisher, she heard my story from the radio and she heard me saying I'm writing a book. So she got very excited. She immediately went to her boss to say, oh, we have to get this book. This woman is so great. She's writing the book. So they contacted me and asked me whether I found an English publisher. So that's how actually I found my publisher. So I was very lucky they found me. And I told them I was writing in Chinese, and I didn't expect they would go on. They would say, oh, no problem. If you are writing in Chinese, just send us the first chapter in Chinese. We will find someone who understands Chinese to access it, to see it's very whether it is good enough. If yes, we can have people translate it into English and publish it. So I sent them the first 2 chapters in Chinese, and they got someone, actually she became the translator for my book, later read those 2 chapters, and she wrote a very good report to the publisher for them to decide to publish my book. So they later told me it was the first time in their publisher's history that they decide to publish a book. One, they don't understand. Two, have not been finished yet. Three, I forgot the three items. So that was a very rare case for them to decide to publish my book. So in this sense, I was very lucky. So the English version of my book was published in 2005 by Anne and Nawan. They are actually the original publisher of the Lord of Ring, the book, the very famous book that was made into a movie later. So, and in 2006, they found an American publisher. So there's an American edition of my book published in 2006 as well. So that's basically my story. So after I finished writing my book, I keep on speaking to the media, and I also worked for the media, for newspaper, for TV station in Chinese first. And then I think from 2018, I started to work for the English speaking media because I always think the best or the most effective way to help people in China is to expose the truth, expose the atrocity of the CCP, and expose the true nature of the CCP, and help more people to recognize their true nature, so that people can work together and stand up to the CCP. And I hope ultimately this evil specter of communism will be eliminated and people can be free of their harm and atrocity forever.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. And I definitely suggest everyone go get the book. But on top of that, I mean, if you could close us out by letting us know what you're doing today and how we can stay in touch with you, how we can keep up with your work, how we can support you. And do you have any suggestions? What's an immediate action item that all Americans listening to this can do to help support your mission today?
Yes, thank you very much for asking that question. I have my own website, which is Jennifer Zeng blog, one word, jenniferzengblog.com. So the links to my book and all my previous years writing are in that website. And also, as you see in my background, I have a YouTube channel called Inconvenient Truths by Jennifer Zeng. So I do regular programs about China affairs and also my insights on China affairs to offer what I know about China. And people have very, very good feedback on my shows because I'm faster than most of Western media about China things, and I offer my unique analysis and my comments and my insights on Chinese affairs, and I offer them firsthand, uncensored information of the true events that is happening in China. So I do regular updates, sometimes twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week, and I plan to do a membership, promote membership for my program and my website, so people can support me by joining the member, sign up to the membership of my channel, because we need to fight against the big tech censorship. I feel very, very sad that because of the infiltration of the Chinese Communist Party, I think many bad things I encountered in China have been imported or exported to America too. So I got censored very heavily on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter. Also, of course, I also have my Twitter account. If you search for my name, Jennifer Zeng, you can find me on Twitter, on Facebook. I'm on all major social media platforms. I regularly share news about China sometimes about my insights. So I do encourage everyone to get a copy of my book, as well as the book I mentioned, 9 Commentaries on Chinese Communist Party and the specter of communism is ruling my heart. And follow me on my social media accounts and sign up to the membership on my website, and you can get regular updates about what's happening in China. I promise you this is uncensored and firsthand, faster, better than many of the so-called mainstream media
Of
can
course.
offer you.
And we'll be sure to link the website and your socials into the description as well. What's that immediate action item that you suggest for Americans in terms of holding China accountable, helping the people that are still there? What would you say?
I think first of all, we need all educate ourselves and to learn the real evil and the real nature of the Communist Party, and especially know their tactics of infiltration in the Western countries. And we need to speak out, and we need to tell our media, our government, our House of Representatives about what we know about the CCP, and we need to stand up and fight against all these infiltrations of the communism. And I need to take back our country from the infiltration of the CCP. And I think everyone can tell at least one another person about what you learned from me today, and everyone can at least make one phone call to your house, to your representative in your area, and maybe tell the media what you say or share them on their website. I think we really do need to stand up together against the evil specter of the communism. Otherwise, their ambition is to take over the world, become the new leader of the world. I actually recently shared a speech by a very famous CCP national advisor called Jin Canrong. So if you look up, he said 10 benefits of taking back Taiwan. So one of the benefits is they can become the #1 of the world. They can beat America after they take back Taiwan. So I think we need to be aware of what is happening, and we really need to fight hard. Otherwise, what I suffer could become what you and your children's children will suffer if we don't fight hard today.
Wow. Well, thank you. I couldn't agree more. And I hope everybody out there understands how important this is for not just the people that are currently in China, but for America's future as well, and the future of the world, because we've got a lot of problems and a lot of them stem back globally to the CCP. Jennifer, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for doing 2 episodes with us. We really appreciate it. And we wish you the best. And we just can't thank you enough for joining us and for taking the time to share your story and doing the work that you do. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. All right. So we'll wrap it there. Thank you so much. We're so thankful. And we'll share all the links. We'll promote everything. We'll try and sell some books and we'll get the word out. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a nice day.
You too.